So I've been thinking of kind of like attention, which is kind of like a technical topic that might not be super interesting for a general audience, but maybe what I have, 1,361 best friends, that's you guys, might enjoy thinking about it with me, is kind of like the tensions between legalization, which I'm for legalization. I don't like the state outlawing things. I think people should be able to make their choices about their decisions. Legalization versus outlawing things, and which in general I'm in favor of. I don't like the drug war. I think legalization should come in that respect, even for hardcore drugs, because and the reason for that, I think people probably pretty much understand. It's kind of a libertarian argument. People should be able to do what they want to do, and if people want to ride dirt bikes, they should be allowed to do that, and if people want to jump out of airplanes, they should be able to do that, but they're not allowed to use drugs. And then also, like, tobacco is actually, I think, like the most dangerous drug in terms of number of people that it kills and its long-term influences, and alcohol is up there as well. And then we're putting marijuana, which is not zero risk but much lower risk, as something that's outlawed. That's totally inconsistent. And then even hardcore drugs, I've learned of recent as I've read and listened to more about this, are not actually that dangerous if they're done safely. And most of the problems with them occur because of prohibition itself. In the same way that people were, fallen over from, I don't know, bad batches of moonshine, but then when it was illegal, when it was trafficked by criminals, but the prohibition of those drugs ensures that its continued use is controlled by criminals, and because of that, the substances become more dangerous for people that consume them, and people should have the right to consume them, as I said. And so even if your goal is to you don't like the substances, just as a kind of a cost-benefit analysis, you should probably support legalization. And then furthermore, it's not that it's okay, let's say we legalize heroin. Are you going to start doing heroin all the time? Probably not. Probably the reason that you don't do heroin, viewer, is that you don't want to do heroin, not that you're afraid you're going to get caught. It's that's not a really good reason not to do something, is that you're just afraid of if you want to do something and you think it's the right thing to do, you should be able to do it insofar as you're an adult that's able to function and think for themselves. And so I'm in favor of legalization, at least in terms of substances. There are certain obviously there are laws that are good laws. You shouldn't be able to murder and things like that, but those are different. And insofar as it's decisions that individuals are making about their own well-being, I think they should be able to do that. But there is kind of a tension there with legalization and commodification and the market coming in, and capitalism coming in, effing everything up, which is something I've been thinking about and talking about quite a bit recently, which I think maybe dissect a little further. So commodification, again, I've talked about it, but it's I think it's I'm starting to think more and more it's kind of like the root of all evil, in terms of you can take any good thing, you could take healthcare, you could take music, you could take food, you can take literally anything that is sold, not literally any, well, to an extent anything, but and commodification comes in, and then it becomes the motive to try to sell as much of it as possible, and to make sure that people consume it, not to an amount that they naturally would be predisposed to, but to an amount that might be bad for them, and usually is, and bad for society, and then that alters the product itself and might make the world worse. And so, but I'm in favor of legalization, as I mentioned. But and so whether it's with, like I said, with drugs, but it's okay, if again, it's better that alcohol is legalized, but if it's I don't think it's necessarily good that it's marketed. I don't think it's good that people might associate masculinity with consuming alcohol or smoking. That's not a good side effect. I don't think it's that big of a deal in terms of alcohol specifically, but if you look at other products, specifically food and medicines, obviously, we're way overprescribed. It can be a kind of a big problem also. So I think that the sweet spot, to get to the point, is I support legalization, but I think there should be strong prohibitions or scaffoldings to protect against the commodification of those things. And that's like what we're sorely lacking in the U.S. It's not like, I mean, we do have prohibition in some things, but in general it's a pretty free society. But there's like no prohibition in terms of advertising, or there's like hardly, like you have prescription drug commercials. You have things that are not legal in other countries in terms of Europe, and our corporations are off the rails, and they're, you know, by and large have captured the regulatory agencies and are making their own policies, and the government's totally corrupt. And that's the point of this channel, is talking about all of that. Well, that leads to outcomes that are bad for things that should be legal. And so the things that should actually be illegal are the decisions that are made by those corporations to manipulate people against their, you know, public interest, but not necessarily the banning of the use of those commodities themselves. That makes sense. But that's just not on the agenda most of the time in terms of legalization. So that was just something I wanted to talk about. And I'll just add one more thing, which is there's one type of legalization which I personally don't have a strong opinion about, and I see arguments for both sides, and that's prostitution, which I would say there's a strong argument that it should not, well, that it should be legalized, in that it's for the reason I mentioned with the drug war. If it's illegal, then the prostitution happens in the dark, and it's, you know, it's done by criminals and pimps, and so the conditions are not good, and the safety of the prostitutes is probably less because they're not as willing to go to the police, and you know, they're more likely, it's more dangerous, so that's not good. Now, and so one might say it should be legalized. I would agree in theory, but in practice in the US, if you legalize prostitution, then here comes, you know, Mr. Market, the capitalist man, and he's trying to make money off the prostitution. And if that takes the same form as it takes for everything else in society, then it's like, okay, we need to increase it. Like the demand's going to be pretty freaking high to start with. And so now it's like, okay, like the society is like, values are already pretty much totally distorted in terms of money, but now it's like, now there's more incentive for young women especially to go and you know, do this, because economically it's just within their interest, in the same way that you know, it might have been, like the libertarians always say, like, you know, what's wrong with child labor? It's not like they're slaves, they chose to do that, now they have food when they might not otherwise. Yeah, potentially, but like the way to rectify child labor is not to like make sure that it's legal so that the kids can make $2 a day so they have just enough not to starve. Maybe it's like, maybe we should, you know, make sure those kids weren't in that circumstance to begin with. But then with prostitution, it's like, okay, so there's going to be high demand, and then also it's like going to be marketed and increased and further commodified, and I don't know. I don't know if I have the words to articulate it right now, but that's, I think, would be a big problem if it takes the standard American form, in terms of like further denigrating human relations and people's relationships with each other, and then creating like traumatic, like, why are the prostitutes doing it? It's not because they enjoy doing it. If they did it on their own volition, they wouldn't need to be paid money. So they're doing things that they don't want to do, but it's worth it in the final analysis based on the money that they might need to survive. So now there's like people that are constantly having sex that are not enjoying it. There's like a word for that, but when you add money in, which is like sexual assault or rape, which I wouldn't say it is, because it is consensual, but it's only consensual because of the money that they need to survive. So it's like, this is a pretty hairy area. And no pun intended. Why did I say that? Bleep it out. But I don't know. Something to consider. Anyways, insofar as things should be legalized, it should always come with a type of regulation and elimination of kind of advertising and false demand being created to the benefit of profit maximizing capitalists with no concerns outside of that value of making money. Because when that's the only value that comes in, then the legalization can have a lot of problems as well. So there is no good solution. The good solution is potentially to legalize, but then to also keep in other values, which are human and non-monetary. So, that's my 2 cents.